Thank you very much. Thank you very much, everybody, for coming. It's really a pleasure for me to make the start of a tour for presentation the project in Europe in 15 cities, all in all, to make the start here in Barcelona, my favorite city, and here in FabLab, my favorite space for such an event. Thanks a lot, Thomas and the FabLab crew, for the support for making it possible here. And I think also this presentation will cover Bitsquare, this decentralized exchange, but it goes over. It's not only focused on Bitcoin and on the idea of an exchange. It's more. It covers also the ideas of decentralization and especially the concept of decentralized autonomous organizations, which are, in my opinion, and I think also in Thomas' opinions, which is quite an interesting concept, which has many possible applications in the context of FabLab. But more on that later. I will start to give a little bit of background, the motivation why I started on this project, then show how to build a decentralized exchange, give a little bit of overview about the concept and show how it looks like, and then we go to this topic of the decentralized autonomous organization, which is a very important part of the project itself because it covers the organizational structure. And then at the end, of course, there is time for questions. I would like to start with a quote from Satoshi Nakamoto. He's the founder, the anonymous founder of Bitcoin. What is needed is an electronic payment system based on cryptographic proof instead of trust, allowing any two willing parties to transact directly with each other. Sorry. And this part, to directly with each other, that's really fundamental, because before we could not send money from one place to another without an intermediary, without a third party who is controlling and who is holding the funds in between, banks usually. And Bitcoin is the first invention which made it possible that you can send tokens for value, money, globally to somebody else without anybody in between, because it's a purely decentralized system. And that's really, I think, a milestone in mankind at the end. I think it has something similar importance like the invention of the internet, in my opinion. And this exchange of money works perfectly good in Bitcoin, but unfortunately we still don't have a solution when you want to enter this Bitcoin system. You need the centralized exchanges where you can buy the Bitcoins, where you can sell the Bitcoins. And these centralized exchanges are basically like that model. You have a middleman in between, somebody who is controlling your transaction, who is controlling your data, who is holding your funds. And in the past, we didn't have better solutions for this, so it was the common model for all kind of interaction. But today, with Bitcoin, we can do better. And this middleman, this gatekeeper of the system, is more problematic like it seems at the beginning, because it's not only about the risk from security that somebody can hack the servers and then can steal the money, which happens all the time at the end in the Bitcoin space. Some people might remember Mt. Gox. That was the most famous incident where a few $100 million got stolen. But it's much more, because much more important is the fact that they are holding the user's data, and they have the ability to connect this this data, which are identifying your identity with and matching this identity with your Bitcoin address. And in combination with the transparent nature of the blockchain of Bitcoin's data structure, in Bitcoin, when you don't know the the way how the data are stored is a decentralized database in a way. It's called blockchain. And this blockchain is completely public. You can imagine like a bank has its database completely public to everybody. Of course, you would be very scared that your neighbor can see all your financial transactions. So that would be a problem. But you have, normally the bank is just in possession of this data and nobody else, so it's somehow acceptable. In Bitcoin, everybody can access and can see and can read this data. And it works for Bitcoin because the addresses, like in the bank, your bank account in Bitcoin, are pseudonymous. That means that as long as you are not exposing that this address is your address, nobody knows it. And with that, you have quite a high level of anonymity. But it's a little bit a complex system, because as soon as you are losing this anonymity, as soon as somebody knows, okay, that's the address of this person, then they can follow all the other address transactions, because it's a system, a chain of transactions where you receive the money and where you spend it. And with clever analysis, with graph analysis, you can get quite a big picture of the financial transactions. And that's not only a privacy concern. That's also a concern for perfectly legal use cases, like companies don't want to expose their financial transactions to their competitors or to other companies. They want to keep their financial interactions private. That's completely normal for everybody, that we don't want that the whole world knows how we are spending and where we are spending the money. So these centralized exchanges are on this border to get into the Bitcoin space. They are these gatekeepers, and as these gatekeepers, they have the ability to match your real life identity, because you need to make your identification when you want to get an account there, and then they know which Bitcoin you have purchased there and how you have used this Bitcoin at the end. So that's very critical aspect. Of course, there are possibilities where you can get back some anonymity when you take care, but it's difficult and it's complex. And this stuff happening. So there were recently, when you're in the Bitcoin space, you have maybe read about this anchor chain, where a research group in the MIT is working on a system where they can basically create a version where everybody need to register to use Bitcoin, and the miners can only mine Bitcoins which come from registered users. And that would be the opposite of for what was Bitcoin created for. That would be a dystopian version of Bitcoin. And there are quite a lot of companies who are working on chain analysis, and there are exchanges who are closing accounts because they find out that maybe your Bitcoin have been used in the past, not from you directly, but when they go back in history, they find that was used in maybe in one shop where you can buy marijuana or whatever, and then they close the accounts. And that's a very dangerous development, in my opinion. And even those companies who are not doing this actively, they have the ability, and the data are there, and the governments can just pick up this data, and that's a very critical point. And it's not only about this privacy aspect, as I said, and additionally it's also attacking a very fundamental property of money, of each money, of our fiat money as well, and that's the property of fungibility. Fungibility means that every unit of money, every coin, every dollar note has exactly the same value and is interchangeable with any other unit of this money. And that's very important, because when that would not be true, then you would need to check and verify every dollar note, every euro what you get, and that would be so much effort and so risky that you would reject to accept it. Then society would fall back to barter. And that was a case, as in the 17th century, the courts in Scotland have already decided in favor of fungibility, and decided in a case where money got stolen and then they found out the thief, and they would have had the possibility to confiscate this money. But the judge has decided, no, the utility of money for society has a higher value than this particular criminal act. And when we start that it's possible that money get confiscated because, maybe after a while they find out this money was used or was stolen somewhere, then people would not use money anymore. And as you might know, every dollar note would fail with something as well, because every dollar note, or nearly every dollar note, has traces of cocaine on it. So when you would apply these rules to the current money, you must not accept the dollar note, because it might have been in the history in an illegal activity, and maybe someday the bank where you want to get rid of this dollar note will not accept it, and it's basically destroyed money. So this concept of fungibility is very central and essential for any type of money. And with this connection that exchanges have the possibility to attach history of a coin to your identity and to your coins, they are attacking this. They are actually destroying this property, and that would destroy Bitcoin as currency. That would create, change Bitcoin in the worst currency. The dollar would be better currency like Bitcoin if that would happen. And I think that's that's the reason why in my opinion, these elements are even more important, like the security reasons. That's very obvious, of course, when you run a centralized exchange and somebody hacks the servers and steals the money. That's a big risk. And when there is a possibility to avoid this, we should go in these directions. And so what's the solution? How you can avoid that a server, that third party is holding the money, and that you're following these problematic patterns. Decentralize everything. That's of course easier said as done, but luckily it's possible. And there are quite a few projects who have proven that this is possible. Most famously, BitTorrent and Bitcoin itself, and Bitsquare is trying to follow the same path. So we think that you can, with the new technology which has been invented in the last 20 years, we have new possibility. We can solve problems which was not possible to solve in another way in the past, like with trusted third parties. We can solve this in a different, more efficient and more secure way. So how is this done in Bitsquare? What is Bitsquare? Bitsquare is a desktop application. You simply download it from our webpage, install it. It's a one-click installer, and run it. It's for all basic, for all major operating systems, Windows, Mac, and Linux, and nothing special required. It operates over Tor, as it uses a custom peer-to-peer network, and uses Tor hidden services. But no worry, you don't need to install anything or set up anything. It's all integrated in Bitsquare, so you don't really see anything from Tor. You just get this very high level of privacy and security from the Tor network. And for ensuring a safe trade, it uses a trading protocol which we will see in a moment. There is no registration required, so when you download, you can immediately start trading. You just do the basic setup in your application, but you don't need to wait for verification of your identity or whatever. And it's completely open source. It uses GPL license. And Bitsquare, also it's important that this decentralization aspect does not stop on the organizational layer. So it's applied, of course, to the infrastructure, like the peer-to-peer network and the way how the protocol is designed. But it also we also applied it to the organizational structure. So Bitsquare is not a startup, it's not a company, it's not funded by venture capital. It's a community project, it's open source, and everybody can participate. And it uses this concept of decentralized autonomous organization. About we will talk about this later. How is the security ensured in such a system? Maybe we imagine a little bit how you could build, when you have a peer-to-peer system, how you could build an exchange. The first naive approach would be that you just send the Bitcoin to the other trader and then wait that he sends you the fiat money. But of course, when he does not send you the fiat money, then you're scammed, and that would happen very soon probably. So that's not working for sure. Then the next approach would be to use somebody who both traders are trusting. So you find an escrow. So you put your Bitcoin to the escrow. The other trader sends the fiat money to the escrow, and when the escrow has both, so he knows both have are fair, then the escrow sends the money to the traders and the fiat to the other trader. But of course, that's exactly the model what the centralized exchanges are using, and with all the problems what we've seen before. Luckily, Bitcoin has a solution to replace this escrow, this third party, and that's this concept of multisig. For the people who never heard about this, it's basically like a lockbox. You have multiple inputs, so different people can put in the money in, and to get out the money again from this lockbox, you need a certain amount of keys, and that can be defined 2 of 3 or 3 of 4, whatever. We use a 2 of 3 multisig. That means you have 3 keys all in all, and you need minimum 2 keys to unlock this multisig or this lockbox. And the key holders in our case are the 2 traders and an arbitrator. So when the 2 traders are starting and they're locking up the Bitcoin, then this Bitcoin gets locked in this lockbox instead of an escrow, instead of a third party. And at the end, when everything goes fine and you want to unlock it, both traders doing the unlock of the Bitcoin, and the Bitcoin buyer will receive his money. That would basically, that's a solution for that, but you have a few problems. The first problem is, what happens? The Bitcoin seller has locked his money there, but what happens when the buyer never sent the fiat money? So you need an incentive that he follows the defined protocol, and we use a security deposit for this. So when the buyer, who has nothing to lose at the beginning, because only the seller has locked up his money, when he is not following the protocol, he will lose his security deposit. It's a little bit like when you're buying a house and you go to the notary, and the seller or the buyer of the house maybe need to deposit a lot of money for the house, and the seller maybe change his opinion a week later, and the buyer has all the problems to get the money from the bank and a lot of effort, and the buyer has nothing to lose. In real life, I think I never have bought a house and don't know how it works in reality, but I imagine that the notary who is doing this will also take some money from both parties, so when the buyer changes his mind, he will lose quite a lot of money as an incentive that he's following the protocol like it was defined. And the third element is this decentralized arbitration system. As we have heard, this multisig, there is a third, the third key holder is this arbitrator, and the arbitrator only comes into place when there is a problem, when one of the traders are violating the process protocol. So, for instance, when one is buying Bitcoin and the other is selling Bitcoin, and when in the protocol the Bitcoin buyer need to send the fiat money to the other trader, and he does not start and does not do this, then the seller has the chance to call the arbitrator, and the arbitrator will investigate. He's like a judge, more or less. He will check the case, he will try to find out what was going wrong, and then will make the payout to the honest trader, and the one who has violated the rule will lose his security deposit. Let's go a little bit more in the details of this concept. As when you want to read more about the details, you can go on our webpage. There is a white paper where it's everything explained, but here we have just a very high-level overview. And here we have on the left side the Bitcoin buyer. We call her Alice in this case. And on the right side, Bob, who wants to sell Bitcoin. And it starts that Alice, for instance, she creates an offer. She publishes this offer that she wants to buy 1 Bitcoin for $500 to this peer-to-peer network. Every other user in the network receives this offer, and it gets displayed in an offer book. So everybody can browse this offer and can decide if they want to take this offer from Alice. Bob, on the other side, he received this offer and says, okay, I will take this offer. And then the trade starts. At this moment, both are paying in their security deposit, this 0.01 Bitcoin here in this case. That's all actually used in Bitsquare at the moment. And the the amount what Bob is selling, 1 Bitcoin, get locked up in this multisig. So at this moment when the trade starts, when Bob is taking the offer, we are both as the client, the software of both clients create this multisig transaction, and the money of both traders get locked up in this multisig and is then not accessible for anybody. Just when both are agreeing to sign a payout transaction, then it gets accessible again. And this, yeah. The next step will be that Alice need to wait for at least 1 Bitcoin transformation, because on the Bitcoin network you need to wait more or less 10 minutes for such a confirmation to be sure that the other sender of the money has not made a double spend or whatever, so that it's really in the database stored. That's just a minimum security requirement, and of course adds a little bit of time loss. But when you use fiat money with banks, you're losing probably much more time with the banks. And then the next step will be that Alice need to transfer her this $500 in this case to the bank account from Bob, and that's happening outside of Bitsquare. So she goes to her banking web page. She get over Bitsquare all the information what she needs, so the name and the bank account from Bob, and then she enter the data in the banking web page, send the money to Bob, and then she go back to Bitsquare and confirm that she has started to transfer the money. Yeah, after she has confirmed, Bob receives this information, and then he has to check on his bank account if he has received the money. That can be instant when you have luck and you use modern payment processors like OKB or Perfect Money, or when it's the same banks in some countries, it's also quite fast or nearly instant. When with SEPA in different countries, it's usually 1 to 3 days. I don't know why the banks use so long. Maybe they send the money by doves or whatever, I don't know. It's really not explainable why they need 3 days to send money from A to B, but it's still the case, unfortunately. And when Bob has received this money, then he's basically happy because he has sold 1 Bitcoin and has received $500, and then he will confirm as well, and with this confirmation the payout transaction gets created also by the software, and this multisig get unlocked by the signatures of both traders, so both have this key to the ability to unlock the multisig, and then Alice will get this 1 Bitcoin, the trade amount, and both get back this 0.01 Bitcoin, which was the security deposit. That's basically the way how the concept works, how you can build a system which does not need a third party which is in control of the money. Because in this case, the money is always in control of the users. When it's locked up in the multisig, it's not in another place. It's just that you need 2 keys or 2 or 3 keys to unlock it again. And the 2 keys are basically normally the 2 traders. It's a kind like a contract. It's a it's a smart contract, it's called, and those are basically like legal contracts which are able to be executed in the blockchain with computer code, and not with our legal system. So both creating this contract, I want to sell you this, want to buy 1 Bitcoin from you with €500, and we are locking up this, and when the seller has received the money, he agrees that he will unlock it as well with the buyer. Of course, the buyer is always interested to get this money out, and then this contract get executed, and the money has moved from Bob to Alice without being ever in possession of a third party. And of course, that's not only theory. It's implemented in software. Here are a few screenshots how it looks like. It's basically what you would expect from an exchange software. You see the market, an overview of the market and the activities. You see this offer book where you see all the offers which are available, what you just can then click buy or sell Bitcoin, and you can create new offers and can define the price and the amount and the percentage from the market price if you want to have it more dynamic and flexible. I planned initially to make a software demo here, but I think it would be a little bit too long and too complicated, so I think it's better to keep a little bit more time for the questions at the end and just leave it with the screenshots. You can try it out and install it from our webpage. It's quite easy to use, and yeah, then you see it how it works. Yeah, and as I said initially, we will bring all this stuff also in the context of FabLab, and that's this decentralized autonomous organizations. Yeah, they call it DAO or DAO. What is this? It's a form of organization where you are executing the rules not by contracts, by legal contracts, but by code and software. And that's yeah, and you use usually a blockchain or blockchain technology like Bitcoin or Ethereum or whatever, and you use also usually a peer-to-peer network or peer-to-peer infrastructure. So you get this decentralized and organization, but the autonomous is a little bit harder to grab what it really means about, because it means that you create an organization which will somehow live by its own. And of course that sounds a little bit like science fiction. But at the end it's not. We will see later that it's already existing in some form. What's needed for that? Also, you have usually kind of like shareholders or participants who are the stakeholders of this organization. And to get this human involvement, because the complicated parts you cannot execute over code and software. You can do the easy parts there, and that's great, what we can do already, but difficult tasks like, for instance, hiring developers for building such a software, you cannot, there are no AIs which you can program which are hiring other AIs for building a software. That's still very, very, very fast science fiction in my opinion. And so you have to create incentives that the organization create these incentives that people come by itself and working on the project and improving the project and doing this task which are needed, which cannot be fulfilled by software. In the exchange example, this security deposit is such a kind of incentive. Because without the security deposit, we have seen there are difficult problems. You cannot solve this by code. So you set up the security deposit, and with that, the traders have a monetary incentive to follow the protocol correctly and do all this work, like going to the bank account and making the transfer and checking the bank account, because they don't want to lose the security deposit. And in the context of decentralized autonomous organizations, it's usually more used. Yeah, it's usually you have a kind of a revenue source, usually some monetary value, but I think it don't need to be limited to monetary value. It can be any value, representation of value, yeah, what you can imagine. That can be representation for reputation or for social value as well. But you need something what you can give to the people who are participating and who are fixing this problem of the human interface, where you have to solve complex, difficult problems, where you need a lot of creativity and stuff what computers cannot do, and that these people get attracted to do this work. That sounds all very abstract, but when you look at Bitcoin and when you look a little bit about the history in Bitcoin, how it started, you see that it's actually a DAO. In the early adopters of Bitcoin, the early developers or people who have contributed to the infrastructure or in promotion, they probably, when they were not completely stupid, have purchased a lot of Bitcoin in these early days, and they are now quite rich with this Bitcoin because of the price increase. This system, what they have all together built, had created much more value over time, and they had their stake in this organization with their early contribution and so on, and get paid at the end with this value increase of their tokens. So you have already a system where there is no CEO and no boss and no company who is paying the developers, where you have just a monetary unit, as a Bitcoin, a token, and when this token, which is representing the value of the overall project, when this token rise in price, in value, when other people think, yeah, that's really important and cool and great, and we want to use this as well, then yeah, more people want it, and then resources gets scarce, and the value rise, and then these people earn money with this. And I think that's a quite interesting and clever strategy how to solve these problems. That you get human workers who are not only working by motivation of altruism for a project, because that does not scale so well, but who are really actually earning money. And I think in the context of FabLab, one second. I think in the context of FabLab, there are quite a few interesting possible applications for that. Imagine a system where you want to deploy IoT devices and you want to have mass deployment, because maybe there are sensors and it doesn't make sense when you just get from a few geeks who has installed the sensors, a few 20 or 50 data, you need 10,000 or whatever. And to deploy this device, even if it's cheap, that 10,000 people in Barcelona are installing this device to measure air quality, for instance, that's quite a challenge. It's either it takes a lot of money or needs support from the government or whatever. People usually don't invest time and energy and money to helping you with that. You don't find so many altruistic people, unfortunately. Maybe in Barcelona, but not in other cities. And to solve this problem, you could use a token which represents the value of the overall project, which is at the beginning zero, because when it starts, usually the project has no value. But everybody who is participating, who is installing, for instance, this device, becomes a shareholder with his participation, even if it's just a very tiny amount. Everybody is a shareholder of this organization, and when then this project is successful and the government sees, wow, we get really valuable data there, we will maybe sponsor this project, or maybe some research institutes pay money for this, then this money can be distributed to all the shareholders. So I think that might be one interesting application, but I think there are much more. Like the way how any organization is working, we are dependent on informal systems to exchange favors. For instance, in FabLab, I don't know much about FabLab, how it works here, but I can imagine the resources, also the access to machines, it's a very valuable resource, because everybody wants to use these great machines, and they are limited. So when people are doing a lot of favors for FabLab, they are helping in many areas or so, they get then the favors, they can use it maybe for free and so. And that's very usual in every organization. Not all parts are completely formalized. You have always this informal part, and that's perfectly fine. It just has two problems. One is it might be a little bit intransparent, and it creates some people complain about and jealous and whatever, and that's also probably you have this everywhere. And the other problem is that you cannot move this value. When somebody is doing a lot of work for FabLab, altruistic, and everybody knows him here in Barcelona, and he can use the machines because everybody knows he's really has contributed so much to the community. He cannot use this social value, this reputation value, when he moves to another FabLab in New York or wherever, because nobody knows him there, and then he has to work again to get his reputation there. So with tokens who are representing any kind of value, whatever this is in your context, you extend this small group of people who know each other personally, who are friends, who are know each other. You can extend this group basically globally, and you can make it exchangeable even with other communities. When there are maybe the Cooperativa Catalana, and they also do great stuff, but have completely different tokens, and FabLab needs something from them, or they need something from FabLab, they can exchange their tokens, and it becomes a multi-currency system where money is much more like the money what we know now. It's not this money where you can only use for buying stuff. It can be anything what represents value for you. And when people have this opportunity that they don't need to earn their euro or the dollar with their jobs where they are selling their time like prostitution at the end when they are doing a job what they don't like. When they have possibilities that they can do what they want and create social value and value for the society and get tokens which are interchangeable to other tokens, and then maybe can buy a pizza in some restaurant with some kind of tokens, then we have a very alternative, very different and interesting monetary system which is much wider as this system what we have at the moment. Yeah. To make it a little bit more concrete, I want to explain how this decentralized autonomous organization is planned to be implemented in Bitsquare. As at the moment, I have not implemented it because I didn't have time, but it's planned for the next months, hopefully. In Bitsquare, the main motivation behind this, as I developed this project with my own savings, with my own time, and a little bit of community donations, and that worked so far. Not very well, but it worked so far, but it does not scale. When now the project gets a lot of success and gets globally used, it does not scale. I don't find enough other developers who are so crazy like me and work all the time for free without earning money, or with, it does not scale well. And the other main reason is that Bitsquare tries to be decentralized in all and censorship resistant in all aspects. And if I would have a company or run it like a startup, that would be the single point of failure, and I try to avoid this at all costs in every layer. So how does it work? In Bitsquare, I have the fortunate circumstances that money or Bitcoin is already present. Because in an exchange, you have money in your wallet, so that's not a problem. And the people who are exchanging Bitcoin to other currencies, they are used that they have to pay a fee. And this business model to pay a fee for a service is also a very straight and very clear and honest business model. I prefer it much more like business models where you get the service for free and then they take your privacy and make business with your private data, or where they give you free access long time, and then when you are dependent on them because you have all your data and all your life already there, then you locked in and you cannot escape anymore. And I think taking fees is probably much better like that. So we have already a revenue source for this DAO, and that's the trading fees. Besides that, the trading fees are also needed for security reasons in Bitsquare, because when there would not be fees for creating an offer, for instance, then you could create 10,000s of offers and could spam the whole system and create damage for everybody. Because the infrastructure, there are no servers. The infrastructure is the peer-to-peer network. So when you are creating too much load for the peer-to-peer network, it's the load for everybody. So it's a common resource, a shared resource, and I think it's money is probably the best way how to regulate the usage of this common resource. So we have the money already. What happens with this money? The money does not go to the DAO incorporation or whatever. It goes directly to the shareholders, and that's also a great feature in Bitcoin. So you can do this. You can make this payment directly from when the trader has to pay his trading fee. He can select one of the shareholders, and then the shareholder receives directly this fee payment. So we have a stream of micro payments because these payments are quite small. So the trading fees will be maybe €1 or whatever, very quite small amounts. And the way how they are paid, they are paid all over time. So with every trade, there is such a small transaction. And Bitsquare has the other fortunate situation that we have this peer-to-peer system, and we can implement quite a lot of this DAO directly in our peer-to-peer system. So we don't need a platform like Ethereum or others where we need their infrastructure to execute the code. So the rules how this payout works how it is defined, which shareholder receives the fees, and other rules. All that can be implemented directly in the client software. So each user has the code running which is executing this DAO. And the Bitcoin blockchain is actually only used to avoid double spends. Only used like a timestamping server when you make a transaction or when somebody is selling the share, because the shares are tokens on the Bitcoin blockchain. So there are Bitcoins, colored coins there. And when you are a shareholder, you can also sell it over Bitcoin or trade it over Bitcoin, and you can transfer your share to somebody else. And to avoid the risk or the fraud risk that a seller of the share is selling at the same time to two people his share, we need the Bitcoin network, this distributed database where everything is defined and where you cannot make a transaction two times to have the security. But the rest of the DAO is basically will be implemented in Bitsquare. What else? Yeah, the shares comes also with voting rights. So all important decisions, like the height of the trading fees, for instance, will be determined by the shareholders. Of course, the shareholders have incentive to make it fair because they want a lot of users. So it's they're running the company at the end. So when they are deciding, we take €100 fees, nobody will use it anymore. So they will kill their own stake. Does not, it does not make sense. And an important part is, the way how these shares are issued is that every month for the work which is needed for the next month, the top stakeholders, so a group of the shareholders who have the highest percentage, they define how much, they make the payout to the contributors, and how much it will, or the maximum amount what the DAO can issue per month will be also defined by voting. So every shareholder can say, okay, we need maybe this month an amount of X shares, and that can change every month basically. So the risk that this board are doing completely stupid stuff is quite low, because everybody can vote on it, and when they make wrong decision, it's always limited to 1 month. Also, when they would make wrong decisions, the users can, when they're updating the software, they're also voting in a way, because when there is a change what they would not support and they don't update, then the change is not implemented because the user is not running this version. So it's quite a distributed structure of power, and a little bit similar to Bitcoin as well. In Bitcoin you have also many different entities, like the miners, the developers, the users, the merchants, and sometimes it seems that it's very problematic in Bitcoin with the power concentration on the miners or developers or whatever. But when you look closer, it's quite a balance, because the miners, they cannot do too much. When they would make a 51% attack and collude all together and steal money or whatever, nobody will use it anymore. They get forked and they are out, and they are killing their investment. The developers as well, when they would develop something stupid, nobody will upgrade to this software, and so it's a quite interesting balance of different entities who have different power and who are all in the same boat at the end. That I think it works quite good. And I think that's the challenge of a DAO, that you construct it in a way that all these elements are playing good together, and then that the incentives align. Because at the end, it's never 100% decentralized, because you always have the human involvement, and that's not decentralized. I cannot decentralize myself. But when you create the right incentives, then you avoid any kind of abuse. And open source is another factor which is very important here, because when this board would make completely stupid decisions or whatever, then anybody can fork it, and the competitor will take over the project. So the board and the people who are more in power in the project, they have a high responsibility and have a high interest, of course, because they are the main stakeholders, to manage the project in a good way. And the payout of these shares to contributors, if a developer want to contribute, he will receive, instead of euro, he will receive a certain amount of shares that will be equivalent to what he would like to get in euro, but converted to the price with the price of the share. And that's maybe the most traditional part, because that's basically like in any company. When you have a good developer, you will pay him good, because otherwise he will look for another job. When somebody wants a lot of money for a task which was not really important, and you don't think that was not so high, okay, you argue with him or negotiate, and if he does not accept, okay, then you will lose him, but maybe it's not a big problem because the contribution was not so valuable. So the board who is doing this judgment about the value what the contributor receive is basically like in any company, the guy with whom you are negotiating your salary, and he tried to make the best for the company. He don't want to lose the good guys, and when somebody wants too much money, okay, he let him go. And one second. A big challenge for such a project is, of course, how to organize people in such a system where you don't have a CIO, where you don't have a hierarchical structure. And luckily there are quite interesting and successful examples for this. The Swedish Pirate Party, also Rick Falkwing is the founder of the Swedish Pirate Party, and he has written a book, Swarmwise, the Tactical Manual to Changing the World. It's a very valuable inspiration for this. He described here in this book about his strategy, what he has used to build up this swarm-like organization of the pirate parties. There was nearly no hierarchy, there was nearly no organization in a classical sense. He just set up the infrastructure to that the people can self-organize, like a forum. You just set up a forum and invite the people, and they should manage to take their task to find out what's need to be done, and they define their groups working together, and it's fluently, it's all voluntarily, it's transparent, and I think it unleashes a lot of potential of people, because when you are forced, because you work for a job and you get the money and then you have to do what your boss tell you, you're working not so creative and so efficient like when you work on your own project where you are completely free and where you do what you really want to do. And I think that's for the whole society a huge potential, which is currently unfortunately not used at all. I mean, 90% of the people are doing jobs where they're not using all the potential what they have. And I think such a system where you just provide the space and leave it to the people that they self-organize, that they find their way where they can be useful in the overall system, is not only for such a project very important and powerful, but for the whole society. And that brings me to this point that for me, this project and this concept of DAO and the Swarmwise, for me that has much more potential and importance, like it's in this context of Bitcoin or a Bitcoin exchange. Because I think our society is really challenged with really hard problems like the climate change and ecological problems and much more. And these problems don't get solved because our current system, our capitalist system, does not align with this. You don't get money, you don't get incentives. There are no incentives, and you don't get a reward when you're doing work which is valuable for the community, for the society, but you get a lot of money when you do things which are very, very harmful for the society. I've also worked in my last 2 companies in such stuff, so it was no good stuff for the society, but it was super easy to earn good money. But when you want to do something really good, when you want to work for Amnesty International, they will not pay you anything because they don't have the money to pay the people. But when you work for a big bank or the blockchain now, then you get a whole shit of money. And so I think we need to solve this really, I think that's existential problems what we are running in. I mean, the climate change, when we are not getting this solved, it's a huge risk and damage for the whole planet. And I think we need to find ways how we are changing these incentive systems, that people who want to contribute for something good, that they have a chance to make their living with this. Because many people, they are not happy with their work. They would like to do something good. I also, in my old jobs, I would like to have worked for open source projects, but I would not have earned any money, and I needed the money to survive. It's and when you have a family, you are much more limited. So many people just cannot escape, and there are, at the end, not too many people I know who are really so evil and really want to do all this shit. The huge majority, 90% I think, they are aware that their work, what they are doing in these jobs, is not really something good for the society. But yeah, they are locked in these systems, and there are no alternatives. And I think to create infrastructure for alternatives, to create such DAOs where maybe many different DAOs and small, it will not change the world in one day, of course, but I think it's a development which can, in the next 10, 20 years, maybe bring a huge difference, maybe in the same extent like the internet itself. And with such a system of interchangeable value representation models, like I said before, where you have your tokens in different communities and they become valuable, and they're not like our normal money, not so narrow. I think with such models we have an escape to get new forms where people who want to do something for the future can become active and become productive and can use their creativity and their potential. So I hope you got motivated a little bit, and if you want to join the Bitsquare project in any way, if you're a developer or want to be active in a community or whatever, go to our webpage, bitsquare.io. You can find all information there. You find the download link for the software, the source code, the white paper, videos, our communication channels. Our main channel is now the forum, so when you have any questions, just pass by. There are many people already there and answering your questions. And yeah, I think I also try to bring this idea and this message to a broader audience. So I'm making this tour through 15 cities in the next months. And for me, this communities like such a meetup or a Fab Lab or so is very important, because I think here are the kind of these early adopters of the people who are trying to, many people of you I think are active in something. And it's more interesting like a conference where people are just there for looking up for the next business opportunity or whatever. So I'm happy to be here, and that's it. If you have any questions.
What kind of way are you going to use for promote your product in worldwide?
For promotion?
Yeah, for promotion of the product.
I try to make a decentralized promotion or marketing. That sounds a little bit strange maybe, but that actually it works. I don't have any funds. I don't have money to pay for professional marketing. I don't like this style also. So I started, I contacted people who I know already from magazines and for interviews. So I've got 4 or 5 interviews the last week. I tried to make this tour through the Bitcoin communities spaces to talk to the people. I'm personally active on the social network, try to answer the questions what are there. And that's one important aspect in this Swarmwise. He said, when you don't have money, you have to give the people attribution. You have to appreciate when somebody's putting energy and time, that he is formulating a question or whatever. When you wait him a week before you answer him, that's frustrating. But when you're very quick with answering, and when you really take every contribution very serious, then you motivate the people that it's growing. And I think it works already pretty good also. So basically since a week, just because before I was very, very busy with development and didn't spend much time. Then I had one interview, and with this interview it was quite exploding until yet. Hopefully it goes on like this.
Okay, thank you. And one another question that I have, I was in another event yesterday, and some of the guys was raising the funds for some kind of project like this. So doesn't you afraid that you can, the people won't see you because we appear in other companies with the big money, with the big investments, who's taking a fees, a big percent of fees for the exchanges. So some, you know how it works in our society, that you need big money for promotion, for get known to the people. So doesn't you afraid that you can be like nobody in this market?
Yeah, I know this problem, and I think it's unfortunate that it still works so well. But I've seen already, I think, and that's also the message in this warm voice, and probably does not work with any project. When you make a block explorer, that's not a project where you can attract people that they become really motivated. But I think when you do something which is, which really tries to move something, to change the world in a positive way, and people feel that this is real and this is authentic and makes sense, then I think the message arrives. And until yet, I had the impression that it works by itself, and maybe it's even more efficient, like all this marketing with money. And that was the case with the pirate parties. When they started, they have zero budget, no money at all. They started from zero, and they got, I don't know, 20% or so immediately. And the other parties were really shocked, and they analyzed and tried to explain how it could work. A new party with no money and such a success. It was just because they had a message which was real, which was not created by marketing professionals, which was really what people think and feel, and they had the possibility and the community to transport this. You can, maybe for the other one.
Thank you. First of all, thank you very much for the presentation. It was a great presentation. You explained well not only the product but also your philosophy behind it, and cool. The question is about the transaction fees. It's quite unusual that a transaction fee is applied on an offer and not on a completed trade. And I'm not sure, I've not thought it through, but is that competitive to other exchanges where a fee is paid only once a transaction is completed?
Also, there's one technical and conceptual reason for this, because without an offer fee, when you create an offer for free, you have the spam problem and other problems as well, like market manipulation. You can create a lot of offers and fill it up, and they're all invalid at the end. So that's one of the first main reasons. And the other is that the offerer who is creating the offer will not pay anymore when the offer is taken. So when the offer is taken, only the one who is taking the offer will pay, and the offer fee is also smaller, is the half actually, like the taker fee. At the moment they're also super low. They're a little bit more like the mining fees, the Bitcoin mining fees. So they are they're negligible. So they are. And later, of course, we will adopt it to whatever the DAO decides, which should be the fee. It will be more or less in the range of competitors, probably, but probably lower. And yeah, I think I've heard already this complaint that people have a little bit problems. It has a little bit it's a missing feature at the moment, that you cannot change the offer. So when you make an offer, you cannot change the price later. That will be also implemented later. But you can already make a dynamic price, so you can set your price 1% under the market price, so it goes always with the market, and you don't need to adapt and change your offer. But yeah, I mean, this exchange has another concept like centralized exchanges, and has also its limitations. You cannot make this day trading style trading where you can trade every few seconds with make a lot of trades very fast, because of this minimum one blockchain confirmation that's average 10 minutes, as a trade takes minimum 10 minutes in average. And also when you make a fiat transfer over the banks, the banks are unfortunately very slow. When you use other payment methods like this OKPay or altcoins, then it can be also immediate. But it's also not compatible to a centralized exchange where you can make kind of high frequency trading. It's another model. It's more like this local Bitcoin for the Bitcoin people here. They are probably familiar with this. It's a different sort of exchange like the classical centralized exchanges. There are maybe in future plans and possibility to make it all more automatic and get more in this direction, but it's complex and future plans.
Okay, I understand. Makes sense. Changing the offer would be then, from my point of view, a very important priority for next development steps, because otherwise you just lose the offer if the market changes.
Yeah.
I have another question regarding, so the project is a Bitcoin trade only, or will the project or Bitsquare in future also support other tokens, other digital currencies?
Yeah, the main currency is always Bitcoin, so you can exchange Bitcoin to a national currency, basically any in the world, because all you need is a payment method, and we support national bank transfer, and I think in nearly every country of the world they have bank transfers, so they can use it. And on the altcoin side, we support at the moment 30 altcoins or whatever, and we're very open. We don't want to be gatekeepers for this resource, so we add any altcoins who are fulfilling a minimum requirement and who are not completely scam coins or fascist coin. I got today, somebody wanted to add a Donald Trump coin, and I will not add Donald Trump coin, and I also will not add a Mussolini coin and an Adolf Hitler coin. So here are my limits. Sorry, I'm the dictator. Here is my limits of my tolerance, but all other coins are welcome.
Okay, thank you.
One question I have, or more a question: do you have the vision that you could exchange, always pivoting around Bitcoin, but exchange other things than crypto or fiat? For example, shares or stakes or time bench.
The Bitsquare DAO tokens are shares at the end, so they will be traded over Bitsquare. At the end, they are the same like a altcoin. They are tokens, and I think at the moment there's still no assets from like Next or Counterparty. They have a lot of assets like shares at the end, and I think I don't know so much about it because I never used it, but they are basically like an altcoin as far as I know. You have an address and make a transfer and have your Explorer to check it. So we don't have any limits there. There are many possible extensions, and it can be plans for maybe a microcredit market, a peer-to-peer microcredit market where people can lend money to each other. There are plans for CoinJoin, which helps for getting anonymity back. There are plans for maybe kind of CFD, so contract for different trading, where you can get then to this more sort of high frequency trading or whatever, because then you don't need to really make the fiat transfer. You abstract it in a financial product and make the trade there. But that's all future plans. And for me, I'm actually not so much interested in all these financial possibilities. I'm much more interested in this DIO stuff, and the DIO, I think, when it really works, it will produce a lot of sub-projects, because the first thing, when there are really many people, you need a working communication platform. And as we know, all the existing communication platforms like Reddit or the forums or whatever, they don't work well, because they have the trolls and the people who are loud and have nothing to say. They create a lot of noise, and you don't get the signal out anymore. It's a lot of work for filtering the information. And I think in such a DAO model where everybody is a shareholder, you have already money and tokens in, and you can use this as for the communication as well. So when somebody want to say something, he has to pay a very tiny amount, and when somebody else thinks that was a great comment and upvote it, you receive money. So people who are creating good content from your posting or from your ideas, what you're promoting, you can earn money. When somebody else is just posting bullshit, he has to pay. And I think that might be a solution which works in this context, because it's already money and it's already tokens there, and which helps to create more quality and creates better results. That's one of these projects where I'm more interested, like expanding it to more complex financial systems. But when it really works, that there are more developers joining and more people, it's open that other people are working on some sub-projects and will get in.
First of all, thanks for the for the presentation, and congratulations for the project, because I find very inspiring to see somebody doing a project this size out of passion and not really for economical gain, which is very unique nowadays, I think. So congratulations. And my question is related to something you mentioned about just using the blockchain for these transactions on bitcoins and nothing else. And my question is more about the DAO and how to handle all this distributed information. What would be the benefits of doing it off the blockchain, like you are doing, and the inconveniences if you do it on the blockchain, like using something like Ethereum or smart contracts?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think when this project would have been developed in Ethereum, I would have probably used maybe the Ethereum infrastructure, but it has a few disadvantages. I mean, to use a blockchain or Ethereum for code execution and so on, it's expensive and it's slow. Because the blockchains, the main benefit is that you get this tamper-proof timestamping database where every information exists only one and it's ordered correctly. And executing logic and so on is not the main target of that. And many people will use it because they don't have a peer-to-peer infrastructure. But when you have already a peer-to-peer infrastructure, and I use actually already in the application a similar use case what I would need for the DAO tokens, I use already. It's basically that you have just a check. The check is signed by the board. Everybody in the application has the public key to verify that the signature is correct and everything. And the only thing where I need the blockchain is to avoid the double spend, to make this timestamping when you're transferring one check to another person, that you cannot spend it 2 times. And all the rest I can do on my network, and actually it's already used for some parts. For the arbitrator, for instance, when at the moment this decentralized arbitration system is not in place yet, that needs a few months more development. And at the moment I'm the only arbitrator, and then maybe a few other people who I know personally, where there is no risk of scam or collusion, so we don't have the need for this more complex system. And when you at the moment when I'm publishing an arbitrator in the system, I sign it with my private key, which only I have, and everybody in the application verify this data with the public key, which is in the software, and it's basically a similar concept. And with the tokens, you just sign a check where there's an amount and a Bitcoin address and a few more information. But it's simply not needed, and I don't want to introduce another technology or a company who provides services, because it just introduces dependencies and it's not needed. Probably it's faster for me when I develop it my own, like I have to adapt to other APIs and whatever.
I have a question more to the consumer side, more like a little bit the practical operation of the system you proposed. Because at the end of the day, the two sides are going to have to go to the physical, to the real banks, right? Wherever they have their accounts to do the transfer. I see right now as an issue when they are, one of the sides or both of them are coming from countries that normally have financial regulations or financial impositions, that a simple wire transfer is not that simple. It's controlled by the central bank or has high fees. Somehow we'll still connect, we'll bring them to other solutions like PayPal, things like that, which can actually help. But how can we actually try to overcome this? Otherwise, maybe it would be easier for them to go to the normal Bitcoin wallets that are spread all over.
Yeah. The banks are, of course, the main problem in the whole system. Unfortunately, that's this legacy 70s system, which don't offer APIs where you can automate process and you don't get verifications when you did a transfer or whatever. So that's this difficult problem where we need this human work to make it work in such a project. I would love to get other solutions. I mean, in OKB and Perfect Money, they offer such APIs, so you can basically program your own bank account in the application with the APIs, so you can make a lot automated. But from the regulatory side with the banks, I don't know how it is in other countries, but at least in Europe, I think you don't have a problem when you make a transfer from one person to the other over the banking system. You don't see, the banks does not see anything from a Bitcoin trade. They just get a reference number, which is the trade ID, but it's a number like any other. When you make a purchase at Amazon or whatever, you also get always ID. And the bank just see, okay, there's a transfer from 400 euro from this person to another person. It's nothing, they don't know anything about the project and about Bitcoin. It has, on the other side, a benefit for Bitsquare from the regulatory side, with all these stupid regulatory issues like anti-money laundering and so, that as long as you stay with low amounts, like 400 euro, you're usually not triggering these rules. That's when you are transferring 5,000 euro or whatever, it's more difficult. And on the other side, when somebody is doing money laundering with 100,000 euro, he has the same problem if he uses a normal exchange or a Bitsquare, because he gets the money at his bank account, and the bank account or the bank will raise the red flags. So we are basically outside of all these problems. The bank are in charge of this, taking care of these rules for anti-money laundering and so on. If there would be solutions where you can transfer fiat money without banks, that would be fantastic. I would love to find such a solution. The only what I know is cash by mail, but that is either it is either very slow and insecure, or very slow and expensive, and turns the bank office to a bank. Because when you are registering, when it's a registered transfer of money, then the bank office is like the bank, the post office is like the bank, so you don't gain anything. It's just even slower like the banks, which is probably hard, but maybe they make it even slower and more expensive, so that's not an option as well. So I think we are somehow locked in to this centuries-old infrastructure what they have built up, and hopefully more and more people move completely out and are just interacting in Bitcoin and in other cryptocurrencies, and someday we just don't need the fiat money anymore. Just for the flea market, you can buy then the dollar notes as that was used in the early century. Hopefully we get there soon.